Week 4 in the books, dual Monday nighters. The Detroit Lions take down the Seattle Seahawks. Jared Goff throwing a perfect game in that one. Interesting conversation about the Titans quarterback situation as they defeat the Finns, who are in huge trouble. And we're going to restack the divisions now after a quarter of the NFL season. Coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks so much to all our everydayers out there for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're a new listener, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Serious about that. Helps us out tremendously. And why are you not subscribed already? Hit that button, smash it right now on YouTube and everywhere you might be listening to this podcast. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Goff out here throwing a perfect game, Matt. 18 for Jared Goff as the Lions 42-29 win over the Seattle Seahawks that came out on fire. They kept the foot on the gas in the second half as well. They ran the ball well, and they obviously threw the ball well. And look, Geno Smith played pretty well himself, and Kenny Walker got in the end zone 3 times. But, man, it was not enough with a slow start for the Seahawks to beat the Lions. And this is that Lions team we saw last year, Matt, and the team that Lions fans hoped they were going to see this year that can contend for that 1 seed potentially in the NFC, even though they're currently not first place in their own division. We'll talk about those divisions and kind of restack those a little bit later in the show. But pretty impressive performance by the Lions on Monday night.
100%. And first off, the 2 Monday night football games at once kind of staggered is starting to grow on me. Like, I start watching that crappy game for a while, and boy, these 2 games couldn't have been any different. And then just threw that on my iPad next to me and then put the main event on the big screen. So I was a fan of that. And it's a good way to pay attention.
And if the first game turns out to be pretty good, maybe you go, okay, well, let's stick with this one until halftime. Let's see what's happening in the other game. And you can kind of go back and forth. So I don't dislike it. And it actually probably gives the network an opportunity to be like, okay, good. We don't have like just the one snoozer. We have a second game, and one of them is going to be really good for us. And someone's going to be watching.
Yeah, I like it. And again, it's one less game I have to pay attention to Sunday at 1 too, so any staggering helps, in terms of ingesting these things.
Yeah. Seeing more of each game. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And Detroit, I mean, they did start slow, but that was a rough environment. I mean, Detroit fans on a Monday night with a team that's, undefeated coming to town, and your Lions are a contender. That place was lubed up and certainly helped the home team. I think the slow start as well as 2 turnovers were pretty much the difference in this game. But there was a lot of star power out there. 2 high-quality quarterbacks, pocket passer types, but just old school slinging it. Ball's not hitting the ground very much, especially with Goff, of course, and 56 attempts from Smith. And, 4 high-quality running backs getting in the end zone, 6 times between them, and Metcalf out there battling Davis. I mean, that was a battle and a show in itself. And Jameson Williams with a huge play. Laporta getting back in the mix. 8 catches for Smith and Jigba. So this is what the NFL wants. Like the lack of passing yardage and lack of scoring, I'm sure is making Roger Goodell and company crazy. But then you put something like this on Monday night to finish the week, and many of us fantasy fates are in the hands of these guys, and it was a lot of fun.
And I wouldn't be mad if we saw this matchup again in January.
No,
right. So 2 teams at 3-1 now in the Seahawks and Detroit Lions after the Lions defeat the Seahawks on Monday night, 42-29. 18 of 18 passing for Jared Goff, 292 yards on only 18 attempts, which is 16.2 average, which is insane. A couple of touchdowns. He had the 70-yarder with Jameson Williams there. But, I mean,
and he caught one.
I was just going to say, like, that he wants on the mantle. 18 of 18 is cool, but he caught his own touchdown pass.
And that was a beautiful throw from St. Brown. I mean, he led him just perfectly, lobbed it over the defender. That was pretty. That was a good stuff there. A perfect way to kind of encapsulate the whole night, you know?
Yeah, and he led him, but he didn't lead him too much because you don't want, an unathletic quarterback. You don't want to throw it out there too far and they, get over their skis a little bit and can't catch it. It was perfect. So
it was perfect.
Looking like athletes out there.
Absolutely. And that was, again, this is the kind of game I think the NFL wants. We'll talk about each division, but I think the Lions are very much a contender. I don't think I feel any less about Seattle. That's not an easy game to play at all.
So 70 points here. Did you feel like, maybe some bad defense with these two teams? Or are you worried about that side of the ball at all? We just talked about how fun the offense was to watch in this game.
A little. I mean, I think that there were some Seattle injuries at play here. I mean, some of their front line guys on the defensive line were out.
Yeah. By the way, I saw the late report, and that's what happens sometimes. We make our picks, and it's a couple days before, and you don't really know who's active and who's not. When you see it's their first round pick, who's going to be a really good player in this league, is out. Boye Maffe's out, and you have multiple guys up front on your defensive line out. That's going to make it a long day for you, and I think we saw the Lions take advantage of that.
Absolutely. Even without Ragnow, but their line is still quite good, and they ran the ball quite well. And it was a balanced, fun attack. I have some concerns about both defenses, yes.
But the offenses were humming. It was a fun one. Lions beat the Seahawks. The other Monday nighter is interesting for multiple reasons, not so much the product on the field, but and one of the things I missed in this game and had to kind of go back to it was like, well, wait a second. The Titans scoring 30 points in this game. It was 9-3 at halftime. It was like, man, a 0-0 in the first quarter. It's like, well, it's pretty easy to flip over to the Seahawks and Lions game now. But the Titans put up some points, and your guy Mason Rudolph was one of the big reasons why after Levis left the game. And by the way, Titans head coach Brian Callahan said that Will Levis, it's an AC joint sprain for Will Levis, by the way. Will Levis will 100% be the Titans quarterback when he's healthy. So they're not going to use this injury and opportunity to go to Mason Rudolph, even though the best football we've seen the Titans play was when Mason Rudolph was in the game at quarterback. And so there's big questions here. And the Titans in the first half of this game look like potential number one overall pick territory. But they were playing the Miami Dolphins, who are just a disaster right now with what they're trying to do without Tua at quarterback. And I think this kind of validates the money that Tua got in the offseason. Like, Tua's a lot better than what else they have at quarterback with the Dolphins. By the way, Titans winning this one 31-12. But the quarterback situation, not so much the play on the field, but what the decisions are that are going to be made about these two teams at quarterback is where my mind instantly goes.
Yeah, I understand sticking with Levis. I mean, we know Rudolph isn't great, but he's effective. He's a solid number two. Didn't screw things up, and frankly, that's all it takes right now against Miami. But I would think Levis is on a short leash. I think you made an excellent point that Tua is showing his value because this is an unrecognizable product in Miami. And real quick, I wanted to mention too, one of my favorite players on their team, Jalen Phillips. I mean, whatever's going on with his knee really doesn't look good at all. And that's multiple injuries in multiple years going back to his college years. And I wonder what his future's like. I mean, so just more bad news for Miami. And I was looking at EPA this morning, worst offense in the league by a wide margin now, Miami. I mean, and that includes the Tua time. I mean, he didn't get hurt the fourth play of the game like Aaron Rodgers last week.
Right.
But completing passes is hard for these guys. I mean, it's so obvious that they're manufacturing touches for Tyreek and Achane and Waddle, and the whole planet knows it, but they're not in dangerous situations whatsoever. I mean, they're not on crossers where they can use their speed. I mean, their feet are stopped, and you get them the ball and they get tackled, and they're not going to break tackles. And I'm an Achane fan, But like when that's your goal line back, you know, like he's so small, and I mean they have none of that power. They don't play with any power whatsoever. Their O line is bad. I feel like I'm also glossing over that Tennessee's defense has been an underrated good story start to finish this year. You know, they've added 2 corners, and Sweat, the second round picks, playing a lot better than I expected. So there actually is a strength on these teams. It's the Titans defense.
And it's not like Mason Rudolph, lit the world on fire when he was in there either. And if you're the Titans, Mason Rudolph is a backup NFL quarterback. So you let Will Levis either figure it out or completely fail, but you have to know what you have in him after this year. And hopefully he does get back and this injury doesn't keep him out a long time. I think
that's the key is you have to know where he is. Right. You just have to know if he's the guy or not. And I think we have some hunches, but Miami's dead, by the way.
Yeah, Miami's in bad. I mean, there's good reports on Tua. It really seems like he's going to come back and play, maybe soon. So
maybe that
can they salvage their season? Might be a little too late at 1-3 now. The Titans victorious at 1-3 on the season as well. Let's restack the divisions, Matt.
I think, let's do that. And I'm pretty sure the earliest Tua can come back though is week 8. And
yes, and there's a bye week in there as well.
Oh, is there? Okay.
Yeah.
And who knows? I mean, he was on the sidelines in good spirits. I mean, I'm certainly not a medical concussion specialist, but he was over there smiling and laughing and, frowning when they're losing,
The IR thing is interesting too, because it's 4 games, not 4 weeks, which makes it an extra week to it because there's a bye week within 4 games. So it ends up being 5 weeks that he's going to have to be on IR.
Okay. That's what you're saying. 5 weeks, 4 games.
Right. Yes. Next, let's restack the divisions. The NFC North, very interesting. There's some divisions I think some teams might run away with it. Some divisions not. So how do we reassess things after 4 weeks after September? We're getting into October now, Matt. October football, things starting to normalize in the NFL. Let's get to the bottom of it next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And of course, there's a reason why FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. And you can start the season with, now you start the season now. You can get into the swing of the season now with a big return on FanDuel. And it's offers like this that make them America's #1 sports book because you can get $200 extra in bonus bets guaranteed. And all you got to do is place your first $5 bet, win or lose, at FanDuel and get that extra $200 to play with. And by the way, whenever you have a hunch in the middle of the game, next Sunday you're watching football games, Thursday night, Monday night, and you want to check the latest stats, maybe view some live play-by-play and so much more, you can find it all on the very same page where you're placing your bets at FanDuel.com. So get started now at FanDuel. Download the app or go to FanDuel.com and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Download the app or go to FanDuel.com. So let's start with the AFC East then, Matt. And we'll go through division by division here and try to stack this thing and make sense of this crazy league that we cover after 4 weeks now. We've got a month of football. I think we've seen some good and some bad from just about every team in the NFL. There's been some injuries out there. We've seen some teams start hot. We've seen some teams start slow. The Buffalo Bills currently lead the AFC East at 3-1. I think the best example of teams looking good and bad is the New York Jets. They've looked awesome twice. They've looked terrible and got stomped twice. And they just didn't look like a good football team. So I don't know what to think of them. We know the Patriots are bad, and their one win on the season in week 1 doesn't look as good because it was the Bengals who have looked pretty bad at least 3 out of the 4 weeks. And then we just buried the Miami Dolphins too. So even if they get Tua back, is it going to be too late in week 8? So this one's easy. It's a runaway for the Buffalo Bills, right?
I think for the most part, yeah. I mean, I have definitely buried the Patriots. I think we're on Drake May watch at this point, and guys like Jalen Polk are getting a bigger role and out there every snap. They're building for another day, and that's perfectly fine. Their offensive line doesn't lend itself to that. One thing I want to throw in with the Dolphins is maybe the second half of the season they can go on a run if Tua comes back and after week 8, but They probably have to steal one between now and then. And we know as the weather gets worse and the season goes on, this team gets worse and worse and worse anyway, so that's a problem.
If you can't steal one from the Titans, what game are they going to steal?
Yeah, exactly. And they looked pretty futile last night. I don't know what to think of the Jets. Could they win the division still? Sure. I think Denver was a bad matchup for them. The weather sure didn't help things. Surtain did a really good job on Wilson. Kind of a fantasy nugget. I don't exactly know what's going on with Breece Hall, but he's not being featured like you'd think. I think they like Allen quite a bit, the rookie running back. And speaking of Allen, that's the beauty of the division, is one team's got a quarterback named Allen who's just a total stud. And maybe some defensive deficiencies popped up. And frankly, I think the Ravens were also a terrible matchup for the Bills. If I were the Bills, I think I'd rather play Kansas City in the playoffs than Baltimore. I mean,
yeah,
because of the physicality of it all,
And I'd rather see that too. We've seen Buffalo KC in the playoffs, and it's a lot of fun. The Bills. That is the Bills division to lose right now in the AFC East. The Jets have to start playing the good way and not the bad way, because it's weird team there. Weird team in New York.
Defense has been solid for the Jets, though. Kind of an underreported story. Everyone's focusing on Rodgers so much.
Well, that's why, dropping a Hall of Fame quarterback in there was like, okay, you've had the worst quarterback play in the league just about over the last few years. At least not like 75% MVP Rodgers should make you a playoff team.
I tend to agree. Yeah. I mean, especially the AFC is weaker than you think now.
There's a lot more opportunities. Yeah. And, there's two teams in the AFC North that only have one win, the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think the Bengals might be better than the Browns based on at least recent. You look at point differential. By the way, the Bengals at 1-3 have only a -2 point differential in the season. The Cleveland Browns have looked atrocious. The edge goes to Cincinnati for the quarterback for sure. Edge goes to Cleveland for the defense. Is either one of those teams good enough to compete for even a wild card spot right now? They don't look like it. Baltimore Ravens got some things right last week at 2-2, and Pittsburgh Steelers, even though they lost in week 4, are leading the division at 3-1 right now.
Yeah, and they got 3 road games out of the way too, so they got a bunch of home games ahead. They have all their division games ahead, which they usually do well. I want to lump the Browns and Dolphins together for 2 regards. First of all, I think a lot of us expected them to compete for playoff spots, and I'm pretty close to burying both. The other thing to clump them together, for different reasons, of course, but they're distant 31 and 32 in offensive EPA. I mean, they're the worst 2 offenses in the league. And the Dolphins have some excuses for it, and I also think some of it's the way they're built. But they shouldn't be. You know what I mean? Like, if you told me the Panthers or the Patriots or teams like that should be the bottom of the league just because they don't have talent. But these 2 teams don't, and it's been disappointing, and I understand the 2 injuries, a massive deal. And the Browns' D is good. It's not great. I think they're a clear 4th in the North. Rhymes.
So this could be a nice little battle down the stretch between Pittsburgh and Baltimore. And Pittsburgh got an early lead, but I don't know if I'd say that they're a better team than the Baltimore Ravens right now. So you if you had to pick right now, would you pick Baltimore or would you pick Pittsburgh that has a 1-game lead on Baltimore to win that division?
I think I still might pick Cincinnati to go to the playoffs, which isn't what you asked me at all. But it's not just because this week went so differently for the Ravens and Steelers that I'm picking the Ravens. But I think if you asked me a week ago, I would pick the Ravens. Like, they definitely, to me, are the team to fear most in the North.
So 3 playoff teams in the North, then?
Possibly, because the Chargers and Browns and Dolphins and Colts and Jags, I don't know if any of them are competitive for those 7 spots.
Yeah, well, the Colts, the Colts just beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, man. That's disrespectful. I
almost didn't lump them in, but
Houston Texans lead the South. They're at 3-1. The Colts are now 2-2. We just saw the Titans pick up their first win, and the Jacksonville Jaguars still looking for their first win. And I'm pretty sure right now I would put my money down that neither the Titans nor the Jaguars are a playoff football team. And I think the Colts are going to be, kind of fighting for the last spot at best, which means the Texans probably run away with this division. We haven't seen the Texans play their best yet, I don't think.
No, I don't think so either. I'm still disappointed in the Texans' run game. just pulling this up, I didn't realize this either, that no one in this division has a positive point differential. I mean, even the Texans are minus 15, but I think it's clearly their division.
And this is another pretty easy one in the AFC West. The 4-0 Kansas City Chiefs already have a 2-game lead on everybody, but all the other teams do have at least 2 wins. Chargers, Raiders, Broncos, all 2-2 on the season.
And yes, I'm taking the Chiefs. I don't think maybe the Chargers can get competitive and hover around 500 and be in it at the end, especially if they get a little healthier. But I don't know that I'm taking the Chiefs as they're clearly my number 1 power rank team, or they're going to get the bye in the AFC anymore.
So you would take the 1-3 Bengals as a wild card team over Chargers, Raiders, Broncos, Colts, and
Titans,
basically
Jag.
those 2-2 teams.
Probably, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure about Bengals versus Jets, but I would take them over the Colts and everybody you mentioned, and certainly the Dolphins and Patriots.
All right, that's the AFC after 4 weeks. Let's take a look at the NFC and division by division, how this some interesting leaders.
This one's harder, yeah.
We're definitely not on our radar as being the teams that would be leading these divisions after 4 weeks. Some fun, I think, to be had this season in the NFC. We'll get into it next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson, sponsored by Game Time. And when you're looking for tickets, whether it's last-minute seats, and you can find some fantastic last-minute deals at Game Time for the next NFL game you want to go to. You want to go see your favorite team, college football. You want to go see a baseball game, a basketball game, a hockey game. You want to go to your favorite concert, see your favorite artist that's rolling through town. You want to just go have a night out and go catch a comedy show, a theater event, whatever it is near you, you can find it at Game Time. And now Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets, especially in some of these bigger venues. Like if you're trying to get tickets for an NFL football game, Game Time Picks really curates that list for you and helps you hone in on the seats you are looking for. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right, let's go to the NFC and start in the East, where double check if this is right. Yeah, it's the Washington Commanders.
Yeah.
The commanding lead in the NFC East at 3-1 right now. Have put up the most points, I think. No, second most points on offense to the New Orleans Saints, who had a really hot start to this season. Second most points on offense in the entire conference, Matt. Washington Commanders 3-1, leading the 2-2 Cowboys, the 2-2 Eagles, and the 1-3 Giants.
I'm not a believer. Now, if we were to power rank these teams, I would have Washington number 1. I mean, I think they're the best team today. I just don't think it's going to hold up. I mean, it's a long season. We're only less than a quarter of a way through it. The Eagles are fighting a lot of injuries. Lane Johnson, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. I mean, that's a trio that's really hard to overcome. But the Eagles' D has really disappointed me, as has Dallas. And now it looks like they're going to be without Parsons and Lawrence for a stretch at least. And that's clearly their 2 best players on defense. They don't run the ball well. But I still think if I had to put a chip down of who wins the division, I'm going to go with the Eagles. They're only 1 game back.
Yeah, I mean, they're only 1 game back. On paper, if healthy, the Eagles are a better team. But you said you're not a believer. I'm not necessarily a believer in the Washington Commanders being the best team in the division, or, running away with this thing or anything like that. I am a believer in some of the things I'm seeing there, and the early returns on Jaden Daniels. You're just like, okay, good. I think we got one there.
Yeah.
The most important.
That's great.
I was reminded by some listeners that Cliff Kingsbury had a pretty hot start with his last quarterback as well in Arizona. So that's kind of where I'm like, okay, look, the defense is not going to be good this year. I don't think for the Commanders. So that's a tough task to say. Okay, rookie quarterback and offense go win this thing in this division. Against the Dak-led Cowboys, as bad as they've looked at sometimes, and the Philadelphia Eagles as well. So I'm with you. I think the Commanders, just from what I've seen, can be a wild card team, but I don't think I would pick them to win the division. But then that means I have to pick the Cowboys or the Eagles, and I haven't liked what I've seen there in a lot of cases too. But I think reluctantly I would probably have to go with the Philadelphia Eagles. They just got to get some pieces back, and then I think they'll be okay. But this is gonna be a fun division, a lot more fun than I thought, and it might be a situation where they're all like 9-10 wins at the end and really battling it out. And like the loser maybe doesn't make the playoffs at all potentially.
So I did say I'm not a believer, and that means I don't believe they can win 10, 11 games or would be a division champion this year.
Mhm.
But to kind of reiterate what you said, though, because of the quarterback, because of all the changes in the organization, unlike Chicago or Denver, who are starting a rookie quarterback, I'm pretty convinced already this is a successful season for the Commanders.
Right. Yeah. If you said, hey, Commanders, Jane Daniels is going to look really good, and you're going to put up like 40 points in week 4, and I'm not even going to tell you what the record is now or at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Commanders fans would go, oh, yes, please, I will take that.
100%. 1,000 out of 1,000.
And the Giants are not going to do anything.
The Giants are, we need to bring them up, right?
The Giants maybe, I think, need to be a little higher. We talk a lot about Doug Peterson and the Jaguars for good reason. I think the Giants, like GM, coach.
Yeah, it might be about that time.
Todd seat time over there, I think.
Minnesota
Vikings at 4-0 now in the NFC North. The Detroit Lions, who looked really good on Monday Night Football, knocking on their door at 3-1. Then you got the Packers and Bears at both 2-2, really competitive division. All teams with a plus point differential. By the way, is this the best division in football right now, man?
I was about to ask you that. I lean towards yes. I mean, I would have thought the AFC North was going away, but I think I'm taking the Bears over the Browns as what I think are the bottom feeders in the division, and the top 3 probably favors the NFC a little bit, because Bengals aren't really holding up their end of the bargain, and I might take 3 teams over the Steelers in this division. I don't know who's going to win it, though. Not the Bears.
The Bears aren't going to win the division, and I wouldn't project them to make the playoffs. I think now that Jordan Love is back, it didn't look amazing last week in week number 4 for the Green Bay Packers, but they got their quarterback back. It's going to be a dogfight, though, because the Packers are at a disadvantage. So it's either the Lions or the Vikings that win this division. And I am a believer in what I've seen from the Vikings. They're just playing really good football. I think, though, I would pick the Detroit Lions to win the division. And maybe that's a little recency bias because of what I saw on Monday Night Football from this team. And just because I still believe like my priors of who the Lions are coming in the year versus the Vikings. But I'm impressed. Like I'm Sam Darnold playing well. Like Sam Darnold, I would put in that Baker Mayfield of like, okay, this guy's earned himself the ability to be a starting NFL quarterback now. And who knows if he keeps this up, maybe more than that. Maybe he's above Baker Mayfield, NFL quarterback, because he's played like it so far this year.
100%. I agree with everything you said. I'm not going to pick the Packers, but I don't think it's time to totally write them off. I mean, they're at 500. They could, win 9 more games, something like that, and be, a really good team. But I kind of look at them as the wild card team that goes into the Eagles or Dallas or Atlanta and wins the first game. Like the wild card team you don't want to play.
Yeah, you don't want to play the card in January. Right.
Exactly. That's who I think they are. I have great respect for the Vikings, and it's not to the Washington level of I don't believe in them. I absolutely do. But the Lions were a Final Four team. They're better at the line of scrimmage. They kind of have that been there, done it factor. They're only 1 game behind. I think the Lions still win the division.
Speaking of Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers leading the South at 3-1 right now. I don't know who really the Falcons and the Saints are. They just played each other too, and it was a tight game. The Saints went crazy to start the year and then came back down to earth the last 2 weeks. Have lost 2 in a row now after the hot start, going 2-0. Carolina Panthers have looked like an NFL team, at least with Andy Dalton at quarterback. Yeah. And, one of the things we've talked about that's really, hit me this week, and we saw it with, the Titans, and we saw it with the Panthers, and we saw it with multiple teams in the NFL. You get a little better more efficient quarterback play, and all of a sudden you start running the ball better too, not just passing the ball better, and your defense all of a sudden looks a little bit better, and the complementary football starts to happen, and that's kind of what we've seen a little bit with the Carolina Panthers. Now I don't think they're going to go anywhere this year, and I think they have the worst point differential in the league, but a lot of that was piled up in the first couple of weeks of the year. So Carolina Panthers are out of it. What to make of the Saints and Falcons? And yes, I would pick the Buccaneers to win this division.
This one's really hard because it's definitely not the Panthers, but if they're at least leaning towards or rushing towards respectability, I'm going to kind of cheat on this one because I really think the Saints, Falcons, and Buccaneers are pretty darn close to equal teams. But because the Bucs have a game up on the other two, I'm going to pick the Bucs.
Yeah,
just math.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy. Yeah, they should be the betting favorite right now because they have a lead and they're all pretty similar. I think it's hard to differentiate them a lot. And it's hard to know what you're going to get week to week. And we've seen that with multiple teams in the NFL. Let's go to the West now.
They have some good wins, too, by the way. Tampa has some impressive wins.
Yeah.
I mean, they beat good teams.
And tiebreakers, too. They're 3-0 right now in the conference.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Seattle Seahawks are 0-1 in the conference. It's the first really good team the Seahawks have played, and it's the first NFC team the Seahawks have played, and they lost that game. So Seahawks, they're an interesting team right now, and they got to get their pieces back on the defensive line, and I think they're okay, but maybe not as good as their 3-0 record looked to start the year. San Francisco 49ers now at 2-2 after beating up on a bad team in the New England Patriots. We've seen them have an up and down season so far. They're kind of in the New York Jets thing where it's like, why are you losing this game over here? But then you looked really good over here. And then the Arizona Cardinals have had I think they played better than what their 1-3 record looks like. And I think the Los Angeles Rams have maybe played worse than what their 1-3 record looks like. They should probably be 0-4 right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's really the Cardinals and Rams are two of the worst defenses in the league. And I don't think it gets much better because they just don't have great players. I mean, it's going to be heavy off seasons on the defensive side of the ball. And I'm not ready to quite flush the Cardinals or Rams yet, but they're nearing the bowl. You know what I mean? I mean, you flushing them, flush them both. They're done.
Flush both those teams just because there's too much to leapfrog in the NFC. They're not going to beat the Niners or the Seahawks in their own division. Are they better than the Falcons, Saints, Bucks? No. Are they better than the Packers, Lions, Vikings? No. Are they better than the Bears? Maybe not. I don't know. Are they better than the Eagles? It's just too much, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And even the Commanders too. So there's too many teams that are playing pretty well that if you're the Panthers, Cardinals, Rams, you're sitting there with one win. The New York Giants, I think it's over for you as far as a playoff berth. All these teams can go on runs, but it's just harder to envision that because I don't think those teams are that talented.
Yeah, and I guess
the defense. They just don't have any. The offense is fine. They just don't have enough on defense.
The easier way to put it is I think the Cardinals and Rams are only better than the Panthers or Giants.
Correct. Yeah.
Instead of all the teams that are better than them.
I think
shorten the sentence.
The Cardinals Washington game was pretty eye opening because I thought they were a little bit similar teams coming in, and Washington, went off.
Yeah.
And so maybe the Cardinals are just not at that level.
I'm still going to take the Niners just out of recent respect and Shanahan and more established. But like the Washington Commanders, I think this is a successful year for Seattle almost any way you cut it.
Yep, absolutely. And I think the 49ers would be the team I would still pick here. They're one game back now. And the Seahawks haven't quite beat anybody yet.
Yeah, you're right. Their wins are fine, but they're not super impressive opponents.
The Niners wins aren't great either. But the Vikings loss looks better now. It was a little bit weird in week 2 and they lost to the Vikings. And the Niners beat the Jets, but the Jets are also a weird team too. So still some things to learn about some of these teams, but I would still pick the 49ers to win that division.
Me too. I just trust them more.
There you have it. What do you think? Let us know. Get involved in our weekly mailbag on Thursday this week at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL is where to drop those questions, or in the YouTube comments. Subscribe while you're there. Thanks for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. For your second listen, check out one of the other 200 podcasts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Here, Matt doing Locked On Dynasty and Locked On NFL once a week. And of course, your team is covered on the Locked On Podcast Network. Matt and I back tomorrow. Peacock and Williamson.